David, you've been reporting a lot on Maidan, so I'd like to ask you what Maidan was for you.
Well, reporters dream of covering a story like this, where there's a country that has risen up and is in tumult and its future is at stake, with events unfolding extremely fast in an extremely unpredictable way. I was lucky enough to get to Kiev just as Maidan was getting underway for the first very big protests, and then to follow the story really all the way through. And it's just been remarkable to see the Ukrainian people expressing their hopes and visions for their country, to see the Russian government respond in the way it felt it needed to protect its interests going into Crimea. Obviously, a hugely traumatic event for the Ukraine side, a hugely emotional one on the Russian side. But it's really been the story of a lifetime. I mean, reporters, get into journalism to cover a story like this where there's so much at stake.
I have also a question on conditions, working in Ukraine and reporting in Ukraine. Being an American journalist and going to Crimea or in the Donbass, does it help you or not?
There are certainly times when it helps to be viewed as an independent actor, not on the Russian side or on the Ukrainian side. There are other times when people view an American conspiracy in things, and then people can be very aggressive. In Crimea, we were viewed very much as the enemy. It was really striking to go from Maidan, which was a much friendlier environment. Western journalists were welcomed as observers who were sort of looking to tell the story of what was taking place, to then going to Crimea, where as Western journalists we were really regarded as the enemy. One woman literally beating me, trying to take my phone out of my hand, trying to rip my glasses off my face because she heard me speaking to an editor in English. That was very striking, something that we didn't experience in Kiev.
You've also mentioned limits of official sources. Do you see the change, between covering during Maidan and covering during in the period of war?
There's no question that all sides are using misinformation to their advantage. We certainly know this is true from the Russian side, from the Kremlin, which has much more media assets at its disposal to pursue this sort of information agenda, but also on the Ukrainian side, where they don't want to acknowledge sometimes the things that the Ukrainian military is doing in the context of a war. It's understandable, but it creates a big challenge for journalists who are trying to get to the truth, to try to help readers and viewers understand what's really going on when there are so many official sources of information that are actually misinformation, that are looking to mislead, to distort the facts, to tell a version of events that just isn't true. And in that case, we really have to dig hard and rely on our own instincts to push toward a point where we feel like we've talked to enough people and have enough clear evidence of what's happening to present a full and complete report.
And maybe my last question, you've been covering also elections, recent parliamentary elections. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about renewal of practices and political elites?
I'm optimistic and I'm pessimistic. I was just saying this is one of the great things about journalists. They're both hopelessly cynical and hopelessly romantic at the same time. And elections are a perfect time for that. I mean, there's no more fun as a journalist than being able to interview people outside of a polling station where they've just engaged in their basic fundamental right of democracy, casting a vote for the future of their country, and asking them how did they vote and why did they vote, and listening to their stories and what they hope for the country. Just this past Sunday in the parliamentary elections, my colleagues and I talked to these terrific babushki, grandmas in Kiev, who had voted for very different parties for very different reasons, but they were so excited to be out voting and really had compelling reasons for each of their decisions. And that pure display of democracy is always fun to cover.